Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I guess they don't mic up the people who run the program so that when the speaker comes up, it can sound really powerful. Is it working so far? Well, I want to thank the University of San Diego for having me. I had both of my master's degrees accomplished here in peace and justice and international relations. And so during my few years here on campus, in the peace and justice class, I learned how countries make peace. And in my international relations class, I learned how countries make war. And really that dual education has really served me well. And also we have a couple of representatives from people who are near and dear to my heart. We have Lynn Sharp Underwood, the executive director of the Gang Commission, which I've been an inaugural member of and haven't been kicked off yet, but I know it's almost time. And usually if you see the votes, I'm sure you read this in the paper all the time, I'm always the nay vote in the program. And so now, Lynn, I get to have a whole half an hour. And so that should be pretty exciting. And then Rebecca Smith from Workforce Partnership, where Reality Changers has its headquarters in City Heights. So the structure of today is in 3 parts, and I'm going to share really, this is a story of not only success, but failure as well. If we want to lead the inner city from gangs to prosperity, we need to know what failure and what success looks like, and luckily I have plenty of examples of both. And then we're going to share a little bit about how Reality Changers works, and then after all that, we're going to figure out how to end gang violence in America. You thought you were just coming for the free breakfast, but instead, in less than a half an hour, we're going to figure out how to end gang violence in this whole country. And luckily, if the speaker gets a little boring and long-winded, I brought 2 videos along as well to spice up the talk a little bit. Sounds like a plan? Yeah. All right, so let me take you back 15 years to a freshman in college. Came to San Diego and was majoring in political science and Spanish literature. And I was looking for a place outside of the classroom to improve my Spanish. And so I found this Spanish-speaking church in downtown San Diego with bars in all the windows. Tough part of town, at least back then. And when I got there that first Sunday, I met 12-year-old Alex. And that first Sunday that I was there, it was the 1-year anniversary of his older brother's death, a bullet to the brain. And that meant that for Alex, he was a much more mature gang member than most 12-year-olds because of his family history. And within that first year that I was there as a volunteer for the youth program, Alex brought his friends, and their friends. And by the end of 1997, I was running a youth program full of bald-headed gang members. And for the next 5 years, I saw the shootings and the killings, and even I myself got stabbed just inches in front of my face. And what's interesting is that, how many of you are in school right now? Are you in classes? Oh, the students are in the front row, huh? All right, that's interesting to take note of. Well, I have good news for you, is that once you get out of school, you can actually read the books you want to read, not the ones that are just assigned to you. And the first book that I picked up out of college was a book called The American Street Gang by my hero, Malcolm Klein. And I actually talked to him just yesterday. He's still good old Malcolm. He's a sociologist up at USC. And after reading this book, The American Street Gang, the author told me, at least, the message that I got out of it, was that everything that I was doing with the gang members, all those positive activities, say taking them to church, the beach, basketball, football on the street, everything that I was doing for those gang members was completely wrong. And by the end of the book, the worst part was, I agreed with the author 100%. Because in the name of doing all these supposedly great things for them, I was strengthening the gang's social cohesion. I was making the core members stronger and the fringe members much more interested in participating in the activities that I was providing for them. Here I was giving them leadership, organization, transportation. And so sometimes people come up to me and they say, "Oh, Chris, were you ever a member of that gang?" And I said, "Well, no, but I was the event planner for the gang." And so I realized that I had to completely shift my approach. And when I went into the teaching profession in the year 2000 at a middle school, I saw all of these smart 7th and 8th graders getting A's and B's, but knowing their symbolic older brothers and sisters, I knew that they'd probably be dropping out in 9th and 10th grade. And so I remember sitting all by myself in that teacher's lounge, and I came to the conclusion, which turned into the founding principle of Reality Changers, is that it's just not right that most inner city teenagers today know more people who have been shot or killed in the street than people who are on the road to college. And that's the reality that we decided to set out and change. And so in May of 2001, almost exactly 10 years ago today, we started Reality Changers with $300 and this new idea, this new approach, that instead of talking about gangs and drugs, which I had done for 5 years, and guess what all the kids did? Gangs and drugs. We decided to shift our approach and say, you know what? We're going to talk about how you can become a first-generation college student. And all of our efforts and all of our talks and all of our face time and advertising time would be devoted to figuring out how to accomplish this mission of building first-generation college students. And luckily, if you take out your scorecard here, you can see that we had a great partnership with UC San Diego from the very first year. They were starting a new program. I saw an ad in the paper that said high school students can get college credit by going to this residential program for 3 weeks on campus at UCSD, where the students live in the dorms, take college classes, and earn college credit, just like Sherry did here on the front of this 2011 yearbook. And so for students who never even imagined of going to college before, never had anybody in their family go to college, to think they don't just believe that they can be first-generation college students after attending this program, they become convinced because they've already succeeded at such a high educational level, and they're not even 15 years old. To introduce you to some of them, the program started a Spanish-speaking church, so most of the students in the program are still Latino, but as you can see, we have a growing face of diversity in the program. African Americans, Asian Americans, and Genemo is from Ethiopia. I'll share with you the first 2 lines of his college essay that he submitted last fall. He's anxiously awaiting the responses. Genemo said, he starts off very cliche and then twists it all around. He says, "Good writers often say that the key to writing is to put the reader in your shoes," right? However, growing up in a small, impoverished town in Ethiopia, I did not have any shoes in which to put the reader until I was 11 years old. And the story gets even better after that. The Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, has come twice to Reality Changers in the past year and a half. First to sort of check us out, and the second, he actually was here on vacation and brought his wife and kids to see Reality Changers in action. And he said that Reality Changers is absolutely a model, not just for the city or the state, but for the entire country. And Michael Galden is pictured with the secretary, well known to everybody in workforce partnership circles. Michael was homeless for 10 years, living in the back seat of a broken down automobile. And he completed all of his homework from just the light that shined from a street lamp up above his car. And when he joined Reality Changers, his dream school, all that he wanted to do was apply to San Diego State. His older sister went there, that's all he had known. But luckily at Reality Changers, we encourage/force all of our seniors to apply to at least a dozen schools. And so when Michael got turned down from San Diego State last year and was heartbroken, that heart didn't stay broken for long once he got his acceptance letter to UCLA. And so now he's changed in that broken out automobile for a very nice dorm room on the Westwood campus of the University of California, Los Angeles. Before I show you the first video, I want to introduce you to class of 2010. In 2009, we had just 20 graduates. Last year, 40, which you see here. This year, we have 55, so you can see we're snowballing. And in the upcoming years, we have a new plan, a business plan to reach hundreds of students every year starting this fall. These 40 graduates, this will be the feature of the second video, these 40 graduates earned over $4 million in scholarships last year. In fact, the students that have been in Reality Changers over the past 10 years have earned over $10 million in scholarships. We've invested $2 million in them to go to these college immersion programs, and in return, they brought in $8 million in financial aid packages from all the schools out there. So this is a 4-to-1 return on investment, and the people bringing back this return are 17-year-old inner-city low-income students. So pretty good investment you can't find in the stock market these days. And then to introduce you to a few of them, if you turn one more page, Carlos Gomez was one of the first students in the program. In fact, I met him when he was in 7th grade in my ESL class that I was teaching at that middle school. And this former ESL kid went from a 1.9 to a 4.5, and then went off to UCLA where he graduated last June. And now he's our chief grant writing officer, and he's brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars. Remember, a former ESL kid bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for our program in the past 9 months. Jesse Sanchez, had the pleasure of talking with him yesterday. He plans to be the first Latino mayor of San Diego. Imagine that, a border city hasn't had a Latino mayor in 150 years. His annual family income was just $7,000 a year until he got a full-ride scholarship to Harvard for $215,000. A year ago, his mom came up to me and said, "Chris, I have a big problem." I said, "Well, what's that?" I said, "Well, I just got done with my income taxes, and I made $8,000 last year. Is that going to affect my son's financial aid?" And I said, Don't worry, senora. As long as you keep your family income in the 4-digit range, I think you'll be just fine. Michael, we heard about Michael. Arlene is well known to Michael Brunker, executive director of the Jackie Robinson YMCA. Arlene was one of those girls that sold flowers for $3 a bushel off of a freeway off-ramp until the very last day she left for Chicago on a full-ride scholarship to Northwestern for $200,000. And being on the gang commission, I know that Ashley, the next girl, her house sits close to this 5-block stretch in San Diego that's the most dangerous street in the city. There have been 10 gang-related homicides on this 5-block stretch in the past 5 years alone. So that means that as often as you and I change our clocks, like we did last week, there's somebody bleeding to death outside on the sidewalk of Ashley's home. She got a $203,000 scholarship to Duke. And Eduardo, the feature of the first video, Eduardo was facing 6 years in jail as a freshman in high school. He had just started the program weeks earlier. We go into the courtroom, and the judge heard about reality changers and said to Eduardo, Eduardo, I'm going to give you 1 month to prove to me that you're the man inside this yearbook instead of the kid that the cops arrested. And so Eduardo doubled his GPA to a 3.8, brought back 13 letters of recommendation, and got the top 2 design prizes in a mechanical engineering class at UCSD. So this bald-headed kid from the toughest part of town outwitted all of the, as he says, nerds at UCSD. I did my undergraduate there, so I can say that. And got the top 2 prizes. And for that, he was honored on the floor of the United States Congress. And that's the feature of this first few-minute video. You ready for the video? Susan Davis said we should support an increased funding, right? Well, by Eduardo not going to juvenile hall for 6 years, like he was facing, that saved the state of California $1.2 million, average of $200,000 per year to incarcerate a juvenile. We're still waiting for our refund check, but we're not holding our breath. Now, before we get to how we can lead the inner city from gangs to prosperity and how to end gang violence in America, a little postscript on what's happened to Eduardo since. As a senior in high school, that same judge that could have sentenced Eduardo to 6 years in prison came back to be Eduardo's personal mentor for that year. And Eduardo had a choice, as you'll see in this next video, of going to UC Riverside or San Diego State. In the end, he chose San Diego State so that he could lead the 4th chapter of Reality Changers. And if you come talk to any of our staff, this is what we're most excited about right now, because we went to a middle school 2 blocks down the street from us, and we asked the principal if we could perform an assembly for 40 of their lowest performing 8th graders. He said, give us the worst you got. In City Heights, which is known as, in the Union Tribune, it was once called the rotting core of America's finest city, and even today is still the probation capital of San Diego. We hope to change that reputation so that it becomes San Diego's capital for first-generation college students. So we get there for this assembly, and there's not 40 students, but 55, only because the other 20 that the principal had invited didn't show up. So they want to just give us all that we had. And for an hour, we showed some videos and got the students excited, and we said that for the 12 of you that raise your grades the most over this next month, you'll be the pioneering members of this 4th chapter being led by Eduardo. And so sure enough, the month passed, and nearly 50% of the lowest performing 8th graders raised their GPA in less than a month. No tutoring, no services, just me and Eduardo standing at the gate every Monday morning, greeting them with this idea and promise and hope that there could be something better out there in their lives. Well, sure enough, one kid named Brandon and his buddy Edmundo will come in at the very end of the talk. I took them home after the first meeting that we had, and I said, hey, you guys, after the boring meeting that we had with your parents yesterday at the school, do you think you'd have so much fun here at your first night at Reality Changers? And Brandon said, oh, my mom was showing off after yesterday. And he meant bragging, but I said, really? What did your mom say to show off so much? And he said, she was telling all of her friends that finally someone in our family was going to go to college, and that someone was going to be me. And Edmundo said, yeah, my mom was saying the exact same thing. And we'll end the talk in a few minutes on what Edmundo said next. But as it turned out that Brandon himself had a court date a few weeks later for something he had done months before. And that's actually where I'm going next, is to get the case finally closed. But as Eduardo and I were sitting there in that courtroom waiting for that case to be called, see, 4 years ago, I had gone to that same court to speak on Eduardo's behalf. And now, just 2 months ago, Eduardo went to go and speak on behalf of his student, Brandon. But little did he know until we got there that Brandon had 2 older brothers. And those were the same 2 friends with which Eduardo got arrested 4 years before. And that one of the brothers is still in jail, and the other brother had 2 kids before he was 18. Meanwhile, Eduardo is a freshman in college, leading the next generation of little Eduardos off to college. So the moment has arrived that you've all been waiting for, is how can we end gang violence in America and lead the inner city from gangs to prosperity? I've been writing a book with the same title, How to End Gang Violence in America, and my book agent says that we're just waiting for people who New Yorkers care about to say something splashy on the cover, and then we'll get it published. So you get a sneak preview of a few of the chapters in this book. And the first one that is my favorite is called The Tightrope of Adolescence. And every kid in America, pretend there's this tightrope right here. It doesn't matter where they were born, whether they're born in City Heights, Linda Vista, LA, they have to get from the safety of childhood to the safety of adulthood while crossing this perilous path. Their teenage years, what I call the tightrope of adolescence. And all those well-intentioned programs out there, like what I ran myself for 5 years, that have the message, don't do drugs, don't be in gangs. It's the equivalent of yelling at that kid on the tightrope, hey, don't look down. And what do they do with that well-intentioned advice? They look down, the dangers become magnified, and they fall into the abyss below. But what we've been able to do in Reality Changers, and as you've seen here in this video, is that our approach is different. That instead of telling them don't look down at all the dangers that they know are down there, we have them focus on accomplishing their goals on the other side of that tightrope, and the students just hold on to the program as their balancing pole, as they themselves take the steps necessary to get safely across to the other side. And so whenever I'm sitting on the gang commission, I'm voting no. If anything ever smells like don't look down, I vote against it. Because we have to focus on accomplishing all the goals that are out there and all that's possible. So that the students stay focused. And now that once you build results after a few years, not only do we have students who have crossed the tightrope already, like Eduardo cheering on the younger students who are just starting, but you have generations and neighborhoods of younger students cheering on those students on the tightrope as well, hoping and praying that they can get to the other side and be the role models that they're so desperately looking for. Chapter 2 is called The Storekeeper Who Breaks the Jar. And now this one's a little bit tough. How'd you like that image? Pretty good? You can, if anything, if you take one image away, it's the tightrope of adolescence, right? If it's don't look down, don't support it. If they're focusing on goals and accomplishing something on their side, that's the only way they're going to get there, is by having programs that teach people and show people how to get to that other side. Storekeeper Who Breaks a Jar, not as strong as this one, but go with me for a little bit. It's a little bit of a stretch. Can you stretch with me for a bit? All right. Imagine this old man, he's setting up this display of glass jars in this store. And all of a sudden, he puts one jar in the wrong place, and half of the jars come crashing down to the floor. The contents of the jar spill everywhere, and he's got a big mess on his hands. And all of a sudden, he hears a little bell, ding-a-ling-ling, and this kid walks in through the front door of the store. And the guy looks up, and he says, perfect, I got someone who can help me out. He says, hey, kid, come here and clean this mess up. What do you think the kid is going to think? Like, well, wait a minute. Why me? What did I do? I just walked. This is your store. Plus, I don't know where the mop is or the brooms. And even if they're back in the employee section, I'm not allowed to go back there. I don't have access to that stuff. So sometimes when we as leaders in the community, we go out and we tell the students, you're the ones with the answers. You guys fix it. It makes as much sense as that old man telling the kid to clean up the mess that the kid didn't create. So, plus when the kid doesn't have access to all the things that the storekeeper has, like say money and resources to clean stuff up, how is he supposed to be able to do it? What might happen is the kid's going to say, no way. Or he could start cleaning up and be really spiteful towards the situation he walked into. Or even worse, he could say, I'm not cleaning up your jars, and knock over the rest of the display. But imagine if that storekeeper, the people who keep all the resources here in the city, in the county, in the state, tell this kid, hey, you know what? We got a big mess on our hands here. Can you help me? Here's a mop. Can you help me clean this up? And we can clean this mess up together. So the kids are the ones facing the situation, but the adults are the ones that have all of the resources, and so they have to work together in tandem and not expect just one side or the other to do it all by themselves. Chapter 3, reacting to a default culture. Any of you ever played pinball before? Anybody? Have some? All right, just making sure. Now imagine you walk up to this pinball machine, And the first thing you do is you yell at, who wants to be my pinball in the front row? Any volunteers? Want to be a pinball? Yeah, all right. Now hurry up and get up and move. Why aren't you moving? Start moving. I can't believe you're just sitting there this whole time and not doing anything. Okay, now what's the problem with that? If you want to play pinball, there's two things that you've got to do. What is it? No, not before you do that. First, you got to put a quarter in the machine. And then after that, you launch the pinball, right? So same thing with gang members. There's oftentimes like, I can't believe these guys are just sitting on the same corner, and they yell at them for not doing anything in life. Well, do you really think that particularly 16 and 17-year-old boys would be sitting on the same street corner in the same clothes, listening to the same music, next to the same smelly trash cans every single day if they had anything better to do? It's the equivalent of yelling at them saying you're so lazy and get off your butt and go do something, as yelling at a pinball that's in the machine where you haven't put in any quarters and invested in it and launched it. So to react to a default culture, it's an endpoint when they're stuck there on that corner. We've got to put some money in, invest, and launch these students off to prosperity. Now here's one of my favorites too, was the gang commission as an example. Lynn, tell them who's on the gang, like just positions of who's on the gang commission.
Well, we have 21 members, community members, as well as the chief of police and the sheriff and the DA's office as well.
And we have the schools chief and the city and the county. So we have all these big people, right? And then somehow me as the council representative, I guess, right? 21.
We have lots of community members, including.
Yeah. So there's half are sort of there's not eight district members that represent each of the council districts. And then anybody who's anybody in charge of, there's the DA and the police chief and the sheriff and all these big time people that are on this commission, right? I consider ourselves to be a tugboat of a commission. We're really strong, we got lots, but we're small. There's only 21 of us. There's not that much that we can all do, just 21 of us. And then there's thousands of gang members in San Diego. The police put at 3,000, 4,000 now, but there's only 100 that are documented under 18, so it's a little skewed, but say thousands of gang members. They're kind of like a freighter of in terms of size. So the commission is like this little tugboat, and then there's the freighter of all these gang members up there. And say that the commission or whatever small body tries to take the issues of gangs head on by saying, we're going to end gangs and we're going to do this and we're going to do that to them. It's the equivalent of a tugboat trying to move a freighter by crashing into the side of it. And what happens when that happens? You don't end up with one shipwreck, but two, right? And so tugboats, like the commission, were this small, strong body. And so the best way to achieve success is to latch onto this freighter of gang issues and pull that freighter into new directions, into safer harbors. Instead of just trying to crash up into it and take it head on, we have to pull it into the directions that we want to see it go towards. And if we don't have any goals or any safety harbors to go to, then probably we don't know where to take it. So we need to figure out where we want to take all these students who are trapped and stuck on those street corners. And instead of crashing into them, then we have to pull them into safer harbors. And then, how many of you have ever seen, it happens every 6 months, I think there was some naked lady that happened to last week when they get stuck and they fall onto the cliffs of La Jolla, right? Every 6 months, right? We live in San Diego, when we get stuck watching this on the news, every 6 months somebody falls halfway down the cliff, never all the way down, right? It's just always halfway. And so then what happens in this rescue operation? What do you see on TV?
Helicopter.
We've got $1 million helicopters with $1 million specialists, and we're all glued to the TV as this multi-million-dollar operation goes on to save the person that's stuck on that cliff, right? Well, oftentimes we perceive gang members as cliffhangers, and they're just barely hanging on to that edge of the cliff by their fingernails, right? And I would suggest that that's the wrong perception to have. Because when you see them hanging on a cliff, because if they just slip one more time, they're going to fall down into that abyss below. Well, the perception is, well, we need $1 million operations, $1 million specialists to be able to perform a successful rescue operation. And really, we shouldn't see it as a rescue operation, but instead, we need to figure out, instead of the cliffhanger, how can we get each one of those students to the mountaintop? Because at the bottom, at the base of each mountain, there's lots of people who can help. Every single one of us in this room can help in some way to get the students a little bit farther and farther up the mountain. Now, as we get higher up the mountain, there's not room for as many people, right? It takes more and more specialists, but at the beginning, everybody can help out in many different ways. And then as you get up closer and closer to that mountain, There's guideposts along the way. For us, we send them to that summer program and the summer camps so they can see themselves actually progressing. And it's true that there's not enough space on that mountaintop for every single student to fit up there. But say for the Eduardos of the world that have made it to the top, he's going to provide hope for all those other students that are looking upwards, hoping to get to that mountaintop themselves one day. And so that way we can help a lot of students instead of just figuring that, oh, we need millions of dollars for each kid. Really, it's not. We can work ourselves as a base, lots of the whole community, and help them get up to the mountain. How do you like that one? All right. Can you handle two more? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. All right. Now, in short, there's two ways to end gang violence in America. There's the easy way and the hard way. That's right. You guys academics, you guys got that one. That's pretty good. Well, first, the easy way. One way to end gang violence in America would be to eliminate all street youth. Lock them up. Let them kill each other. Maybe if we just ignore the problem, it'll all go away. That would be easy, wouldn't it? Or, as you said and suggested, there's the hard way. And that would be to make sure that all students have access to real decisions. How can we expect an inner city kid to truly realistically grow up to be a doctor if the only interaction they ever had with the medical profession is going to the clinic every other week with their mom? How can we expect them to grow up and be marine biologists if they've never even investigated the bottom of a swimming pool before? Or grow up and be journalists if all they ever read is what's scrawled up on the walls of their alleys and their streets? Well, see, at Reality Changers, our students have those real and realistic opportunities to take a cognitive neuroscience class like Beto, and then he went off to Dartmouth, and now he wants to become a dentist. Or like Julio, who took a marine biology class and the life in the underwater sea forest and went to UC Santa Barbara to study off the coast. Or like Selena, who could barely talk as a freshman because of a horrible stuttering problem that she had. She took a journalism class at UCSD over the summer as a high school student, and now she's at UC Berkeley, and she hasn't made up her mind yet whether she wants to be a TV journalist or a radio journalist. See, sometimes if students have two choices, like say they could play a sport or they could join a gang, right? If those are the two options they see for themselves, go to the NBA or go and join the gang, what are the odds of that kid joining a gang? 50-50 shot, right? Plus, sports are seasonal, they're not even all year round. Or say a student has the option of join a gang or 9 other options. What are the chances of that kid joining a gang? 10%? Or you take a Reality Changer student where he believes he can do anything in life and she believes that her future is limitless. What are the odds of that person joining a gang? 1 out of infinity? So not only do the decisions have to be real, but they have to be realistic as well. The students have to be able to say, you know what, this is something possible for me. And by putting them in situations where they get to experience such academic adventures, in our case at least, or whatever, it doesn't have to be academics necessarily, some sort of positive activity, then they'll realistically be able to say, you know what, I've got a lot of options. Why in the world would I sit on that same boring street corner every single day? And now for the grand finale, before I take your questions. It's called, I brought something. Make sure it's still there. Yeah. And it's what I brought that I put behind that screen. Now, while you guys are all having your breakfast and drinking your orange juice, you didn't know that I was putting something behind that screen that's very, very dangerous. And it's so dangerous that I don't want any of you to come into contact with it, because if you come into contact with this dangerous thing that I put behind the screen, it's going to cause you great harm and all of your family members great bodily harm as well. So please, 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 I beg you, don't come and look and see what's behind this screen. Okay, now how many of you want to see what in the world is behind the screen? Right? Now recently, last month we had the Super Bowl, right? $3 million for a 30-second commercial. So why in the world are we having hour-long assemblies teaching about drugs and gangs to middle school students, the most impressionable of them all, without at least getting some sponsorship money from the drug dealers and shot callers, since we're advertising their product for free? Okay, final exercise. There's 3 doors in this place. We've got door number 1. Everybody in this room has to vote. It's a small enough room so we can see whether or not you're voting, huh? You guys have seen the show Let's Make a Deal, right? All right, there's 3 doors. Here's door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. So you have to choose which one that you want. Okay, now if you choose door number 1 and you want to see what's behind door number 1, I'm going to double your salary, just like that. The highest salary you've ever made, I'm going to double it year after year after year for as long as you live. If you choose door number 2, I'm going to give you a PhD. You already got a PhD, I'll give you another one. Or you can choose door number 3. And if you choose to see what's behind door number 3, you'll get to drive the car of your dreams for the rest of your life. And you can get a brand new car every year for as long as you live. So everyone's got to vote. You want to see what's behind door number 1, double your salary, door number 2, get a PhD, or door number 3, drive the car of your dreams. Who wants door number 1, double your salary? I'm watching. All right. Who wants door number 2, the PhD? Dang academics. Or who wants to see what's behind door number 3 and get that car of your dreams? You just raise it high. Well, now wait a minute. How come none of you want to see what's behind the screen anymore? We say, well, you didn't offer it. I said, that's exactly the point. I didn't want you to see it. So I offered you all of these positive options for you to choose. And you were so excited about choosing whether it could be this or that you didn't even remember just a few seconds ago that I had told you not to look at something, and everybody was unanimously in agreement saying they wanted to see what was behind that screen. So when we go out and we try to end gang violence in America, we have to offer all the positive options that are available and really just overwhelm them with all these options to choose from, and they'll choose whatever they're interested in. Just like, and I promise you this final story, Edmundo. Now Edmundo, you got to realize, is about this big, 8th grade, has a big swagger, more than his body can handle. His friends, well, it's not politically, well, we're on, oh well, forget the camera, we'll say it anyways. His friends say he raises his hand like he's retarded or something because he goes like this in class. At least he's raising it, right? And he says a lot of things that he shouldn't say with the words that he says. So, in other words, a perfect candidate for reality changers, right? And on that first car ride home, that same one with Brandon that we spoke about a few minutes ago, Edmundo looked at me and he said, Chris, did you ever like any of your teachers? And it was more profound a question than he realized, because it made me realize that 8th graders are not wired to like their teachers. In fact, they're wired to hate them and to do anything they possibly can to get out of the assignments that the teachers give them, particularly Edmundo. And he was saying to me, if I hate school so much, and look at his old GPA, he really did, how come I love coming to Reality Changers and learning what you guys have to teach me? And after a week of thinking about this, I came up with the answer. Foot Locker. I call this the Foot Locker theory. When you walk into Foot Locker, who are the people trying to sell you the shoes? Well, they're wearing the shirts, right? But usually they're cool, probably inner city guys who know how to say the right thing and walk the right way, and somehow can convince these teenagers to buy $100 and $200 tennis shoes, right? Because they're the ones they're the cool ones that can do it. Now, who are the people in our inner city schools that are trying to sell the shoes, this idea of education to inner city kids? Middle-aged or older people driving their SUVs in from North County, parking there for a few hours and teaching kids who just have bus passes. Eduardo said to me, I don't even have a bus pass. He rides his bike from his house on Central Avenue to SDSU every day. So how are they supposed to relate? Well, those people, and I'm becoming one of them myself, they're not the ones that you want on the floor selling the shoes. Those are the shoe designers, the curriculum designers. They know all their sciences. They know how to make the shoes more aerodynamic and appealing. But you need to have the bald-headed 19-year-old Eduardo and his co-partner, the 17-year-old mohawked Jose, on the floor selling the shoes to these inner city students. This idea of education, that education is something attainable and something that they want. Because you think about it, who are the other 17-year-old and 19-year-olds out in the inner city selling a product? It's not education. But these students like Edmundo and Brandon have responded to Eduardo and to Jose because they're the cool ones on the floor selling the shoes. And sure enough, Brandon, I'm going to court afterwards to finish off all that he had started a few months ago. And the judge should put him on probation for a while. I saw his transcript, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for the first time last night. I'm actually watched one final prop. I won't show you his last name for privacy, I guess. You can see here. B, this is from 6th grade. B, F, 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 D, C, D, F, D, F, F, D, C, D. You get the point. He never had a single A in all of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Had a 0.5, and now we're going to tell the judge he has a 2.86. Supposed to have a 3.0 once you get in reality and stay, but from a 0.5 to a 2.86, and definitely not going to turn in to one of his brothers. And in fact, even if you ask him today, just like he told his mom, finally, someone in his family, finally, someone in Brandon's family is going to be going to college, and it's going to be him. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate this opportunity to lead the inner city from gangs to prosperity, and I need your help, so now we have to go out and take action after what we heard and push them towards that other side safely to the tightrope. Thanks so much for having me. We have time for a couple questions?
You're willing to take some questions?
We're okay? All right. Fire away. Who has a question? Chris?
What were some of like the biggest issues you faced in convincing kids to believe in your program?
Well, as I get older, I'm not the one to do it anymore, right? I have to find the next generation of students to do it. But I think really once they got to UCSD for those 3 weeks and they got to experience it, I didn't have to convince those students anymore. The ones that I had that had need convincing still were the ones that were left behind, which is kind of interesting because once they work it's just as hard supposedly and they sit next to each other in the tutoring room and don't get that 3.5 for us to give them the $3,500 scholarship, they see all their friends go off to UCSD for 3 weeks and they're stuck sweeping the floor for the whole summer. And so you better believe that by that next summer they've got their grades up because they don't want to be left behind. And think about our hook. Say if you do well in our program, we're going to send you to school for 3 more weeks over your summer vacation. That's crazy. If my mom told me she was sending me when I was in 10th grade, I'd say, no way. But if I had 3 dozen of my closest friends going to this program, I'd say, hey, Ma, find me the $3,000 because I'm going to this thing. And so it's not me that does it anymore, it's the students. And by advertising and spending all of our face time on the positive options that they have and never giving any space in front of my students about talking about gangs or drugs or whatever's dangerous in the neighborhood, then pretty soon, it's not always an immediate fix, but pretty soon they have a stage to perform as high as they possibly can. Matt?
What kind of challenges do these kids face when they leave their gang, right? And how is that an ongoing challenge for you guys? Because that's, I mean, for a few hours a day, they're in a safe harbor, but the reality is when they walk out your door, they're back in, well, in their environment.
Yeah, that's right. We have to empower them so that they're strong enough to be able to withstand all the negative forces in their neighborhood. And there's one, like at Say Eduardo, for example, it was an interesting case where he was involved in gangs when he was growing up, and his brother still is, his older one. And he would, that for him, his homeboys would say, oh, you know what? That they didn't know what he was doing. Why are you spending your time over here? How come you're not with us? But then they started seeing him on TV, and then they started seeing these videos and seeing all the accomplishments that he got. And they're like, finally, you know, same thing, almost the same, it echoes of what Brandon's mom said, is that, you know, if there's any of us that's going to make it, you're the one. You can make it for us, and you can, you know, make us all proud. Now there's Jonathan, different story. I knew him since he was in 6th, 7th grade. It was in the transition time, so I was working with the tough gang members in City Heights. I was living in Golden Hill, and all of a sudden I saw these little kids that I knew from school started wearing black jackets, shaving their heads, and I'm thinking, oh no, not on my block. This isn't going to happen on my block. And Jonathan, he would stand on the corner every day, say, hey, what do I got to do to get in your program? So just get your grades up, just get your grades up, thinking he never would, right? Finally, he gets a 3.0. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to take this guy in. Kid would never talk. That's all he'd ever do. What do I got to do to get my grades in? And be like that. Well, took him in, and he didn't miss a single program any week for 3 years straight, sophomore, junior, senior year, even though he had to zigzag through the neighborhood and go by the home of the gang where the gang hung out that he left to join Reality Changers. They'd taunt him, schoolboy this, schoolboy that. Well, sure enough, that kid where he passed, the same week that Jonathan went to college when he was 18, that kid was arrested for first-degree murder and was facing 50 years to life. At one point, the death penalty too. Now that, even though he's still in jail, I went to see him a couple weeks ago, and he's encouraging his little brother, who's a junior now, 11th grade, to continue going to the program. And now that brother is convincing the younger sister to come to the program. And so while he might have missed out, might have been teasing the kids trying to get to Reality Changers, now he's one of our biggest advocates to get the students in. And Jonathan's story sort of ends at, he was the first college graduation that I was able to attend. He went to Point Loma, so I went, and it's this big day, right? And guess who I saw? The same face that I saw when I had originally met Jonathan on his day of his college graduation. Jonathan, this is your big day. You're supposed to be super happy and bursting with excitement. What's wrong? And he said, yeah, Chris, I've been thinking the same thing, that I should be feeling really happy. But after spending 3 years in Reality Changers and this past 4 years as a site director, graduated from college just feels normal. How melodramatic is that, huh? I want him to be super excited, and he's not. Meanwhile, what wasn't normal was that while he was in college those 4 years, 2 of his friends were arrested for murder, and 2 of his friends were murdered. Meanwhile, he was studying on the bluffs of Point Loma, getting his college degree, studying to be a psychologist. So it's a struggle sometimes, but we're able to get through. More questions? Uh-huh.
Thanks for speaking, Chris. I've heard you like 4 or 5 times.
Oh, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome. Every time I get to take something else away that I'm inspired by, motivated by, so thank you. I was wondering, is there volunteer or employee opportunities with Reality Changers to get involved?
Yes, there are. There's a couple. You can do one-time events with us, especially our scholarship banquet that's on June 11th. And Rebecca, you can show them the postcard that's right there on the card. That's on the rooftop of our location. Have you ever been to a nonprofit gala? Right? Well, it's always in a fancy hotel, right? Well, I'm not going to give $50,000 of my donors' money to the Hiltons or the Marriotts. We do it on the parking structure for free, and we get all the food catered for free. So we pay $0 for venue, $0 for food. Yet we need about 100 volunteers on that day. So if you want a one-shot deal, that's where we could use you, and you get a free ticket. Or there's weekly tutoring opportunities where you could volunteer every week and help build up some of these stories. And then for employment, next year we're going to be expanding our senior academy, which is what our 12th graders attend. It's a program all year round, and we're going to be offering it for a cost to anybody who wants to pay for it. Kind of like the equivalent of Princeton Review and what they do for the SAT preparation. What's the equivalent for seniors in the college application process? There is none. And so we're going to be offering the Senior Academy for Princeton Review-like money and use the money we generate from all around the county to be the economic engine to support our students. And we'll be hiring a lot of instructors for that as well. Because as nonprofits, even the name nonprofit, I read this just the other day, what's wrong with nonprofit? So our whole point is to not make money. The article was about, you shouldn't call them nonprofits, you call them for impact organizations, because really and that goes along with the tightrope kind of thing as well. So I kind of like that. Rebecca?
I just wanted to encourage anyone here, if you have any connections to employers, when you think about the 3 doors that Christopher just mentioned, when I worked at Qualcomm, we had a group of Christopher students come out and not only tour one of the divisions at Qualcomm, but also have lunch with the employees, and that just was really, really cool. So if you know anyone that could also just show the students really positive, just positive options in the workplace, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks. Gina, question?
So in this economy, you have people graduating college and many of them are moving back home. Have you seen that, and how has it impacted the students that have graduated from your program?
Yeah, well, starting with 8th graders 9+ years ago, we're just finally starting to get our first college graduates. So I think we have a grand total of 9 college graduates, 120 some in the program. are in college right now, and then 160 in the current program. And so it's a little tough for them, but as we expand, we're bringing back some of our students. In terms of our long-term plan, there's 3 of them. One is to somehow secure our own space so we can offer this program all the time. 2, I want this program to be economically self-sustaining. I want to not depend on the generosity of others, but use the generosity of others as to strengthen us, but not be our base. And then 3, to have at least 50% of our staff be program graduates. So we're providing a few options for them, but it's tough, and so some of them are pursuing master's degrees. The first one who graduated from Harvard is working for Macy's in New York City, and they're working all across the country. Another one started their own Reality Changers-like program in Virginia. So really, they're all over the place. So, but it's tough, but they're working on it just like everybody else.
Do you at all follow the students that do go off to college or have anything to help them succeed in college? Because being a first-time graduate myself, I understand that sometimes it's kind of difficult when your family doesn't know how to get you through college or how to support you through that.
What kind of follow-up do we give for the students? Really, it's the first year that's the most difficult for them in college. If they can make it to the first day of their second year, all of them have stayed and pretty much completed, but for one had some tough family circumstances. And I think our partnership with Sony works out really well, is that we give all of our students who leave the home to go to a 4-year college a brand new Sony laptop computer, which is provided to us at no cost. So that sort of levels the playing field. But there's strings attached to this computer. In exchange for getting it, they have to agree to give us access to their grades and their financial aid, so we know exactly how they're doing all the time. And we just got a grant from College Access Foundation that's provided a part-time job for a college connector. So there's a position now for us where we're going to make sure that this year's class, the biggest ever, successfully transitions to college and have somebody on that as a full-time job in the fall.
I'm curious, there's always a starting point, there's struggles at the starting point. Would you talk a little bit about that?
For
The
5 years.
starting point of Reality Changers, how do you really, what that was like for you?
Yeah, the struggles really came before Reality Changers, and the 10 years of success that we've had over this past decade are all predicated and based on the 5 years of failures that I had with the gang members at the very beginning. And we did things wrong for 5 years by advertising all those things that were, as Eduardo would say, behind the screen. And so now really the shift was, once we got rolling with this though, I'd say the biggest challenge that's still today is that to find the resources to be able to provide the strategies and the philosophy that we've been able to discover for more students. That's our biggest challenge from the very beginning, people who want in and we don't have space for. When we had 4 kids and more kids wanted in, so now we've got 150 students in the current program and 150 students on the waiting list. So I will say this is a challenge back then when we started and today, and it's this, and I'll close with this, is that for prospective members, gangs don't have a waiting list, so why should Reality Changers have a waiting list? And that's really the challenge that we face today, and hopefully together with your support, we'll be able to change that reality. Thank you so much again for having me. Appreciate it.